Welcome to Inside Sim Racing. I'm Darren Ganji here with our European Gamescom overall correspondent, Andreas Nee. How you doing, Andreas?
I'm great, thanks.
I know you're doing great because this is like our 5th show from Gamescom. Anyway, this one is all about Forza Motorsport 5, and this is going to be on the Xbox One exclusively. So what'd you think?
Ambitious project is probably the headline for this one, and I think I will come back to it being a launch title a little bit later. First of all, it's a Forza, so people that own an Xbox, have owned an Xbox so far, know what to expect. And what they showed, they in the press, they had a little press session, and they showed around the different mechanics that they have. And on the show floor itself, they had some demo stations set up, so I was able to, I would have been able to try out the title. Unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, but the lines were rather long, so I kind of stood by and watched people race the game themselves. Didn't really get a chance to try out my limited capabilities on the controller. They didn't have.
So they didn't have wheels, right?
No, they didn't have wheels. So it was.
So I don't blame you. I mentioned this during our E3 report. If they didn't have a wheel set up at E3, I didn't try it. So I could understand that. And I agree with you about it being an ambitious launch title, especially for that franchise. Coming out the day that console comes out.
Right.
So what do you think of like the graphics and stuff like that? Obviously you can't comment on the physics because you didn't really get to try it, and really kind of hard to judge the physics through a gamepad for the most part.
Right. Well, the game looks fantastic, of course, obviously. They took great care that the capabilities of the new console is being used to a huge extent. Obviously, they won't push the hardware already now to the limits because, every game developer has to get used to the hardware. What I found interesting about the title were two things. Apart from, the graphics, physics, or actually I can comment on the physics real quick as well, because they went through some great extent of explaining how they did the tire modeling. They worked with Pirelli before, with Forza Motorsport 4, and basically were driving Pirelli tires. And they wanted, that was great and cool, but they wanted to extend on that. So they went to Pirelli and said, okay, how about pressure and temperature? How does that actually affect the drive capabilities and stuff, the conditions? And they said, well, we don't really know because, they're in the tire selling business, and their approach to making a real world tire is a little bit different than, they don't need to simulate that. They just need to handle it well in real world conditions. So they went to another company, put in the name of that because I can't remember it off the top of my head, but they went to that company, and they're like industry standard for tire testing. And they approached them, and they came up with this test where they put through like a whole bunch of different tires and literally came back with millions of data points, which Tentec then used as a base to simulate the physics. So it's gonna be a different tire model, and they said it's gonna be way more realistic than what they had in the past. So that's something that you could definitely look forward to.
Based on what I got to drive at E3, they had a wheel there, a demo of that Thrustmaster wheel that's coming out. And the tire model did feel different versus Forza 4 and Forza 3. So very interested to see that. Now, what about, did they show any of the historic Formula One content that they're going to have, or the Indy cars, or any of that?
No, unfortunately not. They were only mentioning it in the context of their suspension model, because they said the modulation or the modeling of the different suspensions for an open wheeler also benefited the other cars. Like they had the Mercedes 300 SL, this old car, this oldish old-timer car, which uses different suspension systems for the front and the back wheels, and coming from the code they used with these open wheelers, they could reuse that in those cars as well. So that's another thing that is improved over the previous titles.
Very cool. Anything else?
Yes, drivatars.
Drivatars?
Drivatars. It's really a cool thing. When I saw that in the press conference when they introduced the new Xbox, they already briefly touched on it, and then I got to talk to them. Grunewald, he went through quite some extent to explain that. Imagine you have, we're always complaining about AI drivers. Now, if you're not really familiar with how AI works, you need some, or what's usually or oftentimes used are some neural networks, and it's like an expert thing where you have a situation and you say, okay, an expert would do this in this situation, and then it's a weighted decision, so to speak. It's kind of, it goes a little bit technical, but what it actually comes down to is what they use is real world data, and that is us driving. So you have a drivatar, so kind of like your own personal AI copy of yourself. You go through 3 races initially, and they take that data and they for example check how you approach the corners, the turns, when you pass, how you handle low powered cars compared to higher powered opponents, if you brake early or late, if you take the corners wide, stuff like that. And they all feed that into this drivatar neural network thing that kind of learns and improves over time. And through that, the more you drive, the more different tracks you use, the more different cars you use, the more refined this drivatar model becomes. So in the end, you end up with a virtual copy of yourself, so to speak, that is used in online racing. When you, for example, your friends try to race against you. I'm not 100% sure how that works mechanically. I mean, how the game mechanics work. If you have to say, okay, I want to drive versus Darren, and then it says Darren is not online, but you can take his drivatar or something like that. I don't know how exactly it works. We will have to see when it launches. But what's really interesting is that this data, this whole data, every data point from every drivatar is used to improve every AI driver that is in the game. So if you're driving against, if you're doing a career mode and you have like 15 other AI drivers, they will become more refined over time.
That's very interesting. That's going to be neat.
Yeah.
So what, any other exclusive, or not exclusive, but new details that they had talked about at Gamescom?
Actually, I asked them about them being a launch title, and Dan actually said that is actually, to him, that is the most important question you could actually ask about the game. It's not so much, for them, it's not so much about, the innovations. Of course they have innovations. Drivatars is one, the tire model is another one, the graphics. But the real challenge, the real thing, the big thing for them as a studio was actually being a launch title. When you launch a new console, you have a certain amount of, or bouquet, so to speak, of games. And of course you have to have a driving game. If you only have to look at PS4 for Drive Club. And then, Microsoft was kind of brainstorming what title are we going to take. And then they said as a studio, hey, we want to be that launch title. And they said, are you sure? Because it has never been done before that a Forza title was there at launch time. And they said, sure, we can pull it off. They have experience with the Xbox One, the Xbox 360. And so they could not only take historical or, like general data, like, for example, audio, he said, is always difficult to get right on a new console, but they could draw from historic data. It took them so long on the Xbox, and it took them so long on Xbox 360 that they could incorporate that and say, okay, it will probably take us that much time on the new Xbox One. So actually that's what they all took into account to make sure that they will be there at launch, and from the looks of it, they will make it. So that's really the big achievement, that you will get a AAA title like Forza 5 at launch time for Xbox One, which will be, huge and exciting.
That is huge, and that is a pretty daunting task if you think about it, because, you hear about the developers talking about over time, they learn the intricacies of the platform, of the console, and they're able to really unleash all of its power, and it takes them years sometimes to really get to that point. And for them to take it on at launch, I think I'm sure they are busting their butts. When I talked to those guys at E3, they said, man, we have been putting in a lot of long hours, and we still have a long way to go. And I believe everything's coming out in November. Is that, yeah, so, yeah, it's going to be interesting. Now, you're going to get an Xbox One?
Probably not at launch.
You think you're going to, now you're a PlayStation guy, right?
Yeah, well, currently I am, yeah.
Do you have a 360?
Nope.
Okay, so you're considering an Xbox One though?
I might. It just, the thing is, I wanted to see what it will be like here in Germany, because the first introduction they gave, it was all about multimedia and TV and games, obviously, of course. Now that is tied to services, and I don't know how they will be available in Germany or Europe in general. So I just need to find out what extra value it will be for me, and then of course having a full-time job at the side, so to speak. It's always difficult to find time for gaming in general. So we'll see.
Okay. Anything else about Forza before we wrap it up?
No, I guess that covers it pretty much. It's going to be an interesting and cool title, and everybody who gets an Xbox One and is interested in racing should definitely buy Forza 5, because you rarely ever get a chance to get a AAA title like that at launch.
I agree. Well, thank you, Andreas, for checking out Forza 5 for us and getting all that great information. And we'll be checking it out as well. Hopefully, we've talked to the guys at Turn 10, and they hopefully are going to have us over there before launch. So if that's the case, we're going to give you an in-depth look at it behind the scenes, hopefully from their studios. Anyway, for now, for Andreas Nee, this was our Gamescom 2013 coverage. I'm Darren Ganji. Hopefully you enjoyed it. We'll see you guys next time.